Well, hey, good morning. It's Trade Show Guy Tim Patterson and Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. I'm out walking the dog with Scruffy. It's a cold Salem morning. Well, 40 degrees. It's not that cold, I guess. It was raining 10 minutes ago. Now the sun's out. Well, anyway, by the time this is posted on Monday, which is a few days from now, I'll be packing to go to Anaheim for Expo West, Natural Products Expo West. It's quite the show. 70 or 80,000 attendees, 3,500 exhibitors, 4 days of events, exhibits, and functions, kind of parties, or maybe not parties, I don't know. So I spend all day walking, 7 or 8 miles a day, meeting people, going to the occasional function, finding my way around through LA traffic. Hang on. And having a good time. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fun. We got clients there doing new stuff for Bob's Red Mill, Dave's Killer Bread, Weatherspoon Manuka Honey out of Pennsylvania. They've got New Zealand honey. It's really, really, really good stuff. Schmidt's Naturals will be there. Highlands Homeopathic. We did a little upgrade for them. So yeah, it's a ton of fun. Today's interview on the Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee podcast comes from Leslie Ungar, who's going to talk to us about communication. So thanks for joining me for Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. I've got Leslie Ungar here from Electric Impulse Communications, the president. Leslie, tell me about the company.
The company is Electric Impulse Communications. I named my business after a horse, which at the time I thought was a good idea. It really isn't, because people think I'm an electric company. Oh. But Electric Impulse was a big white Arabian stallion. I still use horses to teach people about their communication and leadership skills. I like to say that you can learn a lot of lessons from the back end of a shovel. If you have a horse, you've got a shovel. Yeah. In the show ring, there's a saying that you only have to be good for 15 feet of the ring. The challenge is you don't know which 15 feet. And I think that's true of anything, whether it's a trade show, whether it's a presentation, whether it's an interview. There's going to be a defining moment. You just don't know which moment that is.
Right.
So that's how Electric Impulse got its name.
Excellent. Excellent. I know, and we're going to talk about communication in a moment, but I'm looking through your website a few moments ago, and I ran across, I have to ask you about this. In the 6th grade, you wrote a play about Custer's Last Stand. I got to hear a little bit more about that. Well, communication skills would have saved the day, you think?
I thought that when I was younger. As I got older, I realized that he was just Custer was an arrogant know-it-all, and communication wouldn't have helped that. That's what got them all killed. But the only thing that lived through, come on, Benj. Okay, Benji's on my lap now.
Oh, good. Now we can compare Scruffy.
That's right.
Here we go.
There's Benji. There's Benji. Okay.
Hey, Benji. Oh, right.
Okay. The only thing that lived through Custer's Last Stand on the American side is Custer's horse, Comanche. And he actually was wounded, but he was, fixed, and he went on to live out a life as just the kind of replica, the last, memorial to Custer's Last Stand. So at the time when I was younger, when I wrote that play, I really did think that it was a lack of communication. Well,
I think it's great you were writing plays in the 6th grade. I mean, not too many kids do that. So why, we talk about communication. We all hope we're decent at it, but why is communication so important, and why is it such a needed skill that there are folks like you that make a good living teaching business how to do it? What's important about it?
Well, if you think about it, no one can move their agenda forward. And really, that's what everybody wants to do. Whether your agenda is to get an interview or a second interview, whether your agenda is to get a client to buy a product, get someone to buy into your idea, your initiative, your policy, the only way that we move anything forward is through communication. And the only way that we know whether we're making progress or not is through communication. Do you have any objections? Is there anything getting in the way of our moving forward? The only way we can move forward is through communication. Now, where I come in is that Everyone, and I would say everyone, my youngest client was 13 or 14, and my oldest client was, in their 60s. But everyone is good at what I call some parts of the communication wheel, some spokes of the wheel, everyone's good at. And the ones that you're good at tend to come more naturally to you. The ones that you're not as good at, you have to put effort, and it's a learned skill, just like anything else. So if you think of it as a wheel, you might be good at public speaking, but maybe you're not as effective when you're leading a meeting or when you're participating in a meeting. Or maybe one-on-ones is your strength, a group meeting is not. Or that talk when you're walking down the hallway, when you can't script it, you are not as effective at. So the reason that people like me exist is because that communication wheel has many spokes, and you've got to learn to be effective at all of them eventually.
And I think that one of the things that a lot of us may be good at is getting what we feel is important out and getting the message out. But I think that in interpersonal relationships, listening is one of the biggest challenges that a lot of us have, I would guess.
Well, it is listening, but you just said something really, really important, Tim. It's getting out what we want to get out, not what the audience needs or wants to hear.
Right, exactly. That's two different things.
It is. And the more we can be geared toward giving the audience what they need, the more we can get what we need or want.
So you sent me some bullet points. I asked for 3 or 4. You gave me like 100. One of the things I thought, well, yeah, that's great. You're over delivering. I love it. So you one of the things you included were your 50 plus rules of communication, and I kind of just went through the top ones. I just wanted to focus on a few of these. You said your first one is there are rules, and you don't have to follow them as long as you're willing to live with rule number 2. Rule number 2 is there are consequences. So talk about the 1 and the 2 there.
Well, I consider it kind of like speed limits, right? You don't have to follow the speed limits, but you have to be willing to pay the ticket when the nice little policeman or policewoman stops you, right? So I might say, gee, I didn't know it was 25-mile-an-hour zone, but that's not gotten me out of a speeding ticket. Right. So if someone says, I didn't know that this was a rule, my answer is, doesn't get me out of a ticket. Ignorance is no excuse. So these are what I consider the rules of communication. You don't have to follow them if you're willing to live with being less effective, not getting the job, not getting the sale, feeling like you wish that the earth opened up and swallowed you during a presentation. So those are the kind of consequences. No, you don't have to follow the rules. You do have to be willing to live with in some way being less effective than you could be.
Yeah, so whatever you choose to do, as long as you understand that there will be consequences, whichever direction you take,
yes.
then you don't have to follow all the rules. So let's say you want to follow the rules. The next one that comes along, number 3, the value of clarity, which is reducing the complicated to the simple. And that seems to be one of the most important things that people can do, and it's probably one of the hardest.
It is. Several years ago, Bill Gates was at a conference, and it was said about him that what was admired most was his ability to reduce the complicated to the simple. Now think about it. He gave us Microsoft. He's a great philanthropist, but that's not what his best friend Warren Buffett admired most about him. It's his ability to take the complicated. Now, the reason this is important is if you think back 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years ago, those who could actually take something simple and make it more complicated had more value, right? Oh, I can charge you more if you think that this is really complicated.
Right.
But in today's world, you have more value if you can say in what I call the time it takes to walk across a room. If you can explain something in the time it takes to walk across the room, that increases your value.
Because we're already in a complicated world, and we need to make it simple. It's not dumbing it down, I don't think.
Right. It's not dumbing it down, but we have a very short attention span. With Twitter gave us, not terribly many characters to get a point across. And so our attention span between social media and texting, I'm just as guilty. It apparently is too much effort for me to respond to someone, okay. I just respond, K.
Yeah.
Now, really? Can you get any shorter attention span than that? So the more that we can explain something quickly, the more value that we have.
And you also talk about begin where you want to end, kind of like begin with
Yes.
the end in mind, which is
Yes.
a little bit different. But so what do you mean by begin where you want to end?
And okay, think about using Waze or GPS or Google Maps, whatever you use. You have to know your end destination, right? Before that wonderful piece of technology can get you there. Well, if we would all follow that and begin at the end, but we all think that we are Steven Spielberg spinning a big, wonderful story, a big Hollywood blockbuster, but by the time we get to the end of our story, we have lost our audience. They're on their phones or they're disengaged in some way. If we give them the end first, it's like paying the toll before you get on the turnpike. Give them the end and then go back and tell your story.
So you teach public speaking to folks a certain amount or not?
I don't teach public speaking per se. I do help people write and prepare and deliver a public speech, a formal speech, on a one-to-one coaching basis.
And I think on your, I don't have it right in front of me, one of the rules was about jokes versus stories. Jokes, some people are great at telling a joke, but most of us, if we have a story, we should be able to tell a story. I've been in Toastmasters a number of years. I've done enough public speaking to know that stories are very important. And we all have our own personal stories that can illustrate a point. So let's talk about stories a little bit. How important are stories?
Stories are very important. If you think back to ancient cultures that didn't even have a written language, but they told stories. Think about the American Indian. You know, they didn't have a written language. They passed on all of their customs and their culture through stories. So stories have a very, very important part in our society. What is a fairy tale? A fairy tale is a great story with hopefully a happy ending. So we've had stories our whole life. The only difference now is that, again, we have to accelerate that. Our audience doesn't have the patience for us to weave that long story that started, well, I was born and then I went to preschool. So we've got to get to the end first, and we've got to take what I call the scalpel of clarity, which is like a surgeon cutting out only what he needs or she needs to cut out. That can be painful, and one of the reasons that someone like me exists is that it's easier for me to take the scalpel to your story than it is for you to take the scalpel to your story. But the more that you edit, the better story you will have.
One of the things you probably would agree with me is that when you're working through creating a presentation, whether you're writing it yourself or whether you're writing or delivering something that someone else has written or you've co-written, I think it's really, really important to practice it out loud so that you get a feel for how the words come out, how the organization of the speech is, because it may look great on paper, but it's got to translate to being presented, and those are two entirely different things.
Yes, when you're writing for what I call the ear, which is when someone hears it, that's a very different writing than writing for the eye when someone can read it. And so there are many advantages to practicing out loud. One of them is timing. You will never really know how long a speech is if you don't practice out loud.
Right.
You need to know which words to emphasize. I didn't say she stole the money. I didn't say she stole the money. I didn't say she stole the money. Same sentence, but with the different word emphasized, it makes a huge difference.
It really does.
There are many reasons to practice out loud, but what I tell my clients is that it doesn't count as practice until you have practiced out loud.
Yeah, and at least 3 or 4 times, if not a dozen, depending on your audience and how important it is to you. So
depending on your time, but I will tell you this. I tell my clients the day that you're going to give a presentation, do not practice it that day. If you have to practice it, say before 8 a.m. Because what happens is you're going to get to a certain part of that speech and you're going to look down at your notes and you're not going to have any idea whether you just said it or you said it an hour ago when you practiced.
Ah, interesting.
And so you're going to have a 50-50 chance of either repeating something or leaving something out.
Well, when you get to my age, if you do that, you just say, I'm having a senior moment. So You mentioned something which I was in radio at the age of 19, and I did that for 25 or 26 years as a career. The first week I was on my first job, a guy said to me, when you're writing commercial copy for an ad, you're writing for the ear, not for the eye." And I think that not many people have told me that. So I'm really glad you said that, because we speak differently than we read, and so what you say out loud will come out differently than if you're just telling a story.
If there's one thing that, if you ask me what is one mistake that people make on when they're preparing a more formal speech, I would say that people think they need to sound very profound when actually they need to sound more conversational. You'd be better off to leave the profound for writing for the eye and be more conversational in what you write for the ear, because that's what we're used to hearing. We're not used to hearing a profound, big words. We're not used to hearing that. And so that sounds more odd to us when we do.
Yeah, we could go on forever, Leslie. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to wrap it up. You're in Akron, Ohio. Is that correct?
I am in Akron, Ohio, home
the great state of Ohio,
and LeBron James.
Yes, and it's the Electric Impulse Communications. What's a great way to find you?
electricimpulse.com.
Okay.
And you can also find me on Twitter at Leslie Ungar, cell phone 330-607-5730. Text me something that you'll remember from this interview.
There you go. Leslie, thank you for your time. I appreciate you joining me here on Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee.
Thank you. Thank you, Scruffy. Nice to meet you both. Thank you. Bye-bye, Scruff.
All right. Hey, I want to say thanks to Leslie Ungar of Electric Impulse. I really appreciate her spending some time with us on Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. Before we move on to the Trade Show Tip of the Week, I want to invite you to head on over to iTunes and leave a rating and a review if you like the show. There'll be a link in the show notes. So Trade Show Tip of the Week comes from a blog post I did just a few weeks back called 7 Trade Show Exhibit Add-ons for less than $500. Now, you can have a really expensive trade show exhibit, but what if you want to add a few things and kind of spruce it up? So you could try an iPad or Surface stand. So putting a tablet at the front end of your exhibit often is an unspoken invitation for visitors to engage. They sit there and want to poke things, especially if there's like flashy things on the screen. These could be freestanding or attachments that mount on an existing table or counter. You can also put a literature stand in there. Those are very inexpensive. You can, instead of stacking sales sheets on a counter, stack them in a literature stand. Look very nice, freestanding. You could also attach to an exhibit you already have. Easels are cool. Easels are they're kind of old school, frankly, but a well-placed easel can show off a larger, poster-sized graphic in a slightly different and perhaps dynamic way. TV monitors. You can put a TV monitor up. I mean, a 50-inch TV monitor can be had for under $500, and you can put some sort of video on there and a thumb drive that just loops throughout the entire show. Table throws. Maybe you just have a small exhibit, or you've got a small table in the midst of a larger exhibit. In either case, you can add a custom printed table throw. That's an easy thing to add on. You can also turn a table into a charging table with an add-on charging kit. It may not work with any table, but if you have a table that you can fit one of these on, it's a great little feature. Your visitors with their phone batteries going dead will thank you for it. Banner stands. Add a couple of banner stands. If you got some open space, you can show off something different. And you can certainly find one that'll fit your budget of under $500. And I said 7. How about we give you one more? Rental plants. No, seriously, rental plants. Rental plants are actually really kind of cool. They're cheap. You can get like a topiary ball, a 4-foot hedge. There you go. That's the trade show tip of the week. This week's one good thing. It's got to be a Natural Products Expo West tomorrow morning. I'll be heading out to John Wayne Airport in Santa Ana, check into my Airbnb, and head over to the show the next day. I'll be working with a lot of clients like Bob's Red Mill, Dave's Killer Bread, Weatherspoon, Manuka Honey, Schmidt's Naturals, Highlands, and of course check in with other current clients and previous clients, as well as walk the floor for what seems like days and days and days on end. I know from past experience, my Fitbit tells me that I walk 6 to 8 miles per day while at the show. It's a big show. Lots of space there at the Anaheim Convention Center. Over 70, maybe 80,000 people, 3,500 exhibitors. it kind of leaves me ragged at the end of the day and the end of the show, but it's fun. You get to test hundreds of new products, and I meet hundreds of people over the course of the show. Good stuff. And Natural Products Expo West in Anaheim is this week's One Good Thing. Have yourself a great week.